The world is loud, the quest is long, but here, the fire is warm and the data is safe. Welcome back to Restoring Mana. And before you drift off, leave a memory in the comments. Tell us about the one save point you'll never forget. Now let the world fade away. In the quiet hours of the night, we journey back to 1997, to a world composed of steel, shadow, and a green, glowing energy known as Mako. Final Fantasy VII is not just a video game. It is a cultural landmark, a digital tapestry that defined a generation. To understand its history, we must look at the way it was born from grief and ambition, shifting from a simple detective story into a planetary epic that changed the landscape of storytelling forever. The origins of this journey began in 1994, shortly after the release of Final Fantasy VI. Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of the series, initially envisioned something much different than the sprawling sci-fi world we know today. The first drafts were set in the bustling, rain-soaked streets of New York City in the year 1999. It was a detective story, a hot-blooded noir featuring a protagonist named Joe. This version of the game was intended for the Super Nintendo, utilizing the 16-bit sprites that had made the series famous. However, Destiny had other plans. During this period of development, Sakaguchi suffered the profound loss of his mother. This personal tragedy redirected the soul of the project. He became obsessed with the concept of life, death, and what remains behind. The New York setting was discarded, but the idea of a life force, the Lifestream, remained. The Mako energy, once a simple plot device for a detective's case, became a metaphor for the Earth's own soul being drained by a heartless corporation. As the vision grew, the technical limitations of the Super Nintendo and the upcoming Nintendo 64 became a wall that Square could not climb. Nintendo's choice to use cartridges meant that the cinematic experience Square dreamed of, pre-rendered backgrounds and high-quality video, would be impossible. A single cartridge could hold roughly 64 megabytes of data. Square needed hundreds. This led to the Great Migration to Sony's PlayStation. The CD-ROM, with its 650 megabytes of storage, provided the canvas for the masterpiece. It allowed for the introduction of full-motion video, or FMVs, which bridged the gap between gameplay and cinema. For the first time, players weren't just moving pixels, they were watching a movie they could control. When you enter the world of Final Fantasy VII, you start in Midgar, a city that serves as a grim reflection of industrial greed. Midgar is a circular metropolis divided into two worlds, the wealthy who live on the massive plates above and the poor who dwell in the slums beneath the steel sky. The atmosphere is heavy, smelling of rust, oil, and ozone. The protagonist, Cloud Strife, arrives as a mercenary with a cold heart and a giant blade. He is a man of few words, a former member of the elite soldier program who now works for Avalanche, an eco-terrorist group led by the booming, passionate Barrett Wallace. Their mission is to blow up the Mako reactors that power the city but kill the planet in the process. The narrative of Midgar is one of claustrophobia and grit. You spend hours navigating sewers, train graveyards, and corporate towers. You meet Aerith Gainsborough, a flower girl who seems to be the only source of natural light in a city of neon. Her church in the Sector 5 slums is a miracle, a patch of yellow flowers growing through the floorboards of a ruin. This contrast between the industrial cold of Shinra and the natural warmth of Aerith defines the emotional core of the game. Tifa Lockhart, Cloud's childhood friend, provides the grounding force. She is a martial artist who runs a bar called Seventh Heaven, a sanctuary where the weight of the revolution is momentarily lifted by the sound of a jukebox and the clink of ice in a glass. But Midgar is only the prologue. The true scale of the history of Final Fantasy VII is revealed when the party finally escapes the city and steps out onto the world map. The camera pulls back, the music swells with a sense of adventure and longing, and the player realizes that the dark city was just a small speck on a massive planet. From here, the journey takes us to the quiet village of Kalm, the sprawling military base of Junon, and the glittering, neon hallucination of the Gold Saucer. Each location is a memory, a place where the history of the world is whispered through the NPCs and the architecture. In the village of Kalm, we experience one of the most famous sequences in gaming, the Nibelheim flashback. We see a younger Cloud following the legendary Sephiroth into the mountains. Sephiroth, once a hero and a mentor, discovers the truth of his origins, that he was created in a lab using the cells of an ancient, extraterrestrial being named Genova. His descent into madness is slow and terrifying. He burns the village to the ground, walking through the flames with a calm, silver-haired grace that turned him into one of the most iconic villains in history. This moment changed the stakes of the game. It was no longer just about stopping a corporation, but about facing a fallen god who wanted to wound the planet so he could absorb the Lifestream itself. The gameplay history is just as significant as the plot. The Materia system allowed for a level of customization rarely seen in 1997. By slotting crystallized Mako into weapons and armor, players could teach their characters magic, summons, and special abilities. This system reflected the game's themes, that knowledge and power are drawn directly from the earth. The summons, Ifrit, Shiva, Bahamut, became legendary for their long, cinematic animations. They weren't just spells, they were events that filled the screen with fire, ice, and cosmic energy. As the story moves toward its midpoint, we arrive at the Forgotten Capital. This is a place of bioluminescent shells and ancient stone, sitting at the edge of the world. It is here that the most famous tragedy in gaming occurs. Aerith, the last of the Cetra, kneels in prayer at an altar under the water. She is trying to summon Holy, the only magic capable of stopping Sephiroth's meteor. When Sephiroth descends from the ceiling and ends her life, the silence that follows is deafening. There is no grand speech, no miracle revival. There is only the sound of her white materia bouncing off the floor and falling into the dark water. This moment broke the hearts of millions, but it also solidified Final Fantasy VII as a work of high art. It taught us that loss is permanent, and that the world moves on even when the people we love do not. The final act of the game takes us to the northern crater, a jagged scar on the planet where the air is thin and the cold is biting. Here, the truth of Cloud's identity is revealed. He was never a first-class soldier. He was a regular grunt who suffered from Mako poisoning and trauma, piecing his identity back together from the memories of his fallen friend, Zack Fair. This vulnerability made Cloud one of the most relatable heroes in JRPG history. He wasn't a chosen one or a perfect warrior. He was a broken man trying to do the right thing. The history of Final Fantasy VII didn't end in 1997. It spawned a compilation that expanded the lore for decades. We saw Advent Children, a CGI film that explored the guilt Cloud felt after the game's conclusion. We played Crisis Core, a prequel that gave us the story of Zack Fair and the origin of the Buster Sword. We even saw Dirge of Cerberus, a shooter focusing on the mysterious Vincent Valentine. But the most significant evolution was the remake project, beginning in 2020. This wasn't just a graphical update, it was a reimagining that played with the very concept of fate. It acknowledged that players knew the story and used that knowledge to create a new meta-narrative where the characters are fighting against the whispers of fate to change their destined endings. As we look back on this legacy, we see a story that is more relevant today than ever. It is a story about the environment, about the danger of unchecked corporate power, and about the strength found in a found family. It is a story that asks us what we leave behind when we go. The Lifestream is always moving, always recycling our memories and our energy into new life. As we leave the charred remains of the Midgar behind in the marshes, we begin to understand the true texture of the world. Final Fantasy VII is a game of contrasts, not just between the rich and the poor, but between the technological and the mystical. This is best exemplified by the town of Junon. Junon is a fortress of iron built directly over a peaceful fishing village. As you walk through the lower village of Under Junon, you feel the weight of the massive military airport hanging above you. The air is salty and damp, and the light is a perpetual gray. The contrast between the simple lives of the villagers below and the sterile, cold precision of the Shinra military above serves as a silent commentary on the cost of progress. When we finally infiltrate the upper city, we are greeted by the sight of the Sister Ray, a cannon so massive it seems to defy the laws of physics. It is a monument to human ego, a weapon designed to kill gods, yet it sits in a city where soldiers march in endless, rhythmic circles. The history of Junon is the history of the Shinra transition from a mere energy company to a global superpower. It is a place of cold steel and sharp salutes, where the individuality of the people is swallowed by the uniform. But the world is not all steel and shadow. If we travel across the ocean, we find ourselves on the sunny shores of Costa del Sol. This is a place of respite, a Mediterranean dreamscape where the water is a crystal turquoise and the sand is white as bone. In a sleep-focused script, Costa del Sol is a vital chapter. It is the moment where the characters and the players are allowed to breathe. We see Hojo, the most villainous mind in the game, sitting in a beach chair, reminding us that even evil takes a vacation. The music here is bossa nova, light and airy, a stark departure from the industrial drones of the first disc. It reminds us that despite the encroaching darkness of the meteor, the planet still holds beauty, warmth, and the simple joy of a sunset over the waves. Beyond the sun-drenched beaches lies the tragic dust of coral. The history of Barrett Wallace is etched into the burnt wood of this coal-mining town. Coral was a place of hard work and community until Shinra arrived with the promise of Mako. They traded their self-reliance for the convenience of the future, and when the reactor failed, Shinra burned the town to the ground to cover their tracks. This is where we learn that Barrett's anger isn't just political, it's personal. His prosthetic gun arm is a literal manifestation of his trauma, a permanent replacement for the hand he lost trying to save his best friend, Dine. The story of Coral is a warning about the seductive nature of corporate dependency, a theme that resonates more deeply with every passing decade. High above the ruins of Coral sits the gold saucer, a glittering jewel in the desert sky. To understand the history of the gold saucer is to understand the Japanese bubble economy of the 1990s. It is a place of excess, of neon lights that never dim and games that never end. The square room, the battle square, and the Chocobo Square represent the ultimate escapism. In our journey, the gold saucer acts as a dream within a dream. It is here that we participate in the Chocobo races, a tradition that became a cornerstone of the Final Fantasy legacy. The history of the Chocobo is as old as the series itself, but in the 7th entry they became a complex ecosystem. We didn't just ride them, we raised them. We searched the world for the rarest nuts and greens. We bred them in the quiet of the Chocobo farm, hoping for a blue Chocobo that could cross rivers or a green one that could scale mountains. This process was a slow, meditative ritual. It required patience and a deep connection to the land. The ultimate goal, the gold Chocobo, was the key to the game's greatest secrets. It allowed us to reach the Round Island, where the most powerful summon of all, the Knights of the Round, waited in silence. We must also speak of the Materia, the crystallized knowledge of the ancients. In the lore of the game, Materia is formed when Mako energy is pressurized over thousands of years. It is literally the thoughts and memories of the planet made physical. When Cloud slots a fire Materia into his sword, he is tapping into the collective memory of every fire that has ever burned on the planet. This magic system is elegant because it ties the gameplay directly to the ecology of the world. There are 5 types of Materia: green for magic, yellow for command, red for summons, purple for independent boosts, and blue for support. Each color has its own frequency, its own place in the Lifestream. The red Materia is perhaps the most mysterious. When you call upon a summon, you aren't just casting a spell, you are tearing a hole in reality to invite an ancient guardian to fight by your side. These beings, Shiva, the Queen of Ice, Ifrit, the Lord of Flame, and Bahamut, the Dragon King, are the planet's antibodies. They are the defenders of the world, and their history is older than the human race. As we move deeper into the mountains, we come to Nibelheim, a town that shouldn't exist. According to the records, Nibelheim was burned to the ground by Sephiroth 5 years prior. Yet when the party arrives, the buildings are standing, and the people claim to remember no fire. This is the moment where Final Fantasy VII shifts from an adventure into a psychological thriller. The new inhabitants are actually Shinra employees and clones, actors in a play designed to cover up a massacre. In the basement of the Shinra mansion, we find the notes of Professor Hojo and the hidden coffin of Vincent Valentine. Vincent is a relic of the past, a man who has been sleeping in a cellar for decades to atone for his sins. He was a Turk, a member of Shinra's secret police who fell in love with a scientist named Lucretia. His history is one of heartbreak and biological horror. He was experimented on, his body transformed into a vessel for chaos. Vincent's presence in the party adds a gothic, melancholy layer to the story. He represents the silent guilt of Shinra's past, a man who chose to sleep because the waking world was too painful to endure. Finally, we must look at the sky. Throughout the second half of the game, the meteor hangs above us, a red scar in the atmosphere. It is a constant reminder of our mortality, but beneath it, the people of the world continue to live. They continue to shop at the markets of Midgar, they continue to sail the seas, and they continue to hope. This is the ultimate message of the history of Final Fantasy VII, that life is resilient. Even when the sky is falling, even when the memories of our past are revealed to be lies, we find the strength to stand together. The Lifestream is not just a source of power, it is a promise. It is the promise that no one is ever truly gone and that every action we take ripples through the history of the world. Rest your eyes now as the red light of the meteor fades into the green glow of the Lifestream. The mountains are quiet, the sea is calm, and the journey continues in your dreams. Moving away from the haunted basements of Nibelheim, our history takes us upward, beyond the clouds and into the cold, silent reaches of space. To understand the ambition of the Shinra Electric Power Company, one must look at Rocket Town. This is a place built around a dream that stalled. In the center of the village sits a massive, tilted rocket, the Shinra No. 26, leaning like a tired giant against its gantry. This is the home of Sid Highwind, the Dreamer's pilot. Sid's history is a story of sacrifice and the crushing weight of lost potential. He was meant to be the first man in space, but at the final countdown, he aborted the launch to save the life of his assistant Shira, who was still performing safety checks in the engine blast zone. The rocket remained on the ground, and Sid remained in the shadow of his own failure. In Rocket Town, the wind always blows, whistling through the rusted scaffolding, sounding like a long, low sigh. For a sleep aid script, the atmosphere of Rocket Town is one of melancholy peace, the sound of a dream deferred, resting in the dust. But the history of the world is not just found in the sky, it is hidden in the depths of the ocean. After the acquisition of the submarine, the player is granted access to a silent, underwater world. Down here, the music changes to a muffled, ethereal heartbeat. You can see the sunken Jelnica, a downed Shinra transport plane that has become a graveyard of mutated experiments. The water is a deep, heavy blue, and the only light comes from the bioluminescent flora clinging to the sea floor. This is where the Emerald Weapon resides, a massive, silent guardian of the planet drifting through the trenches like a nightmare. The weapons are the planet's ultimate defense mechanism, biological machines triggered by the North Crater's distress call. They represent nature's wrath, unthinking and unstoppable, reminding humanity that for all our steel and Mako, we are small compared to the ancient will of the Earth. As the story progresses toward the end of the second act, the world begins to change. The Shinra Company, in a desperate bid to destroy the meteor, moves the sister ray cannon from Junon to the edge of Midgar. They aim to fire a blast of pure Mako energy through Sephiroth's barrier at the northern crater. This is the peak of the corporate-industrial war against the divine. The sound of the cannon firing is a thunder that shakes the continent, a reminder that humanity's greatest sin is its belief that it can solve any problem with more power, more energy, and more destruction. Eventually, we must face the return to Midgar. This is not the Midgar of the beginning. This is a city in chaos under martial law, illuminated by the red glare of the meteor hanging directly overhead. We parachute into the city at night, the wind rushing past our ears as we descend toward the plates. We face the remnants of the Shinra leadership atop the Mako cannon. We see the end of the Turks, Rhino, Rude, and Alina, characters who were never truly evil, but simply men and women doing a job in a world that had lost its way. Their history is one of loyalty to a failing system, a mirror to our own struggles with duty and morality. With the cannon silenced and the Shinra leadership in ruins, only one path remains, the descent. The northern crater is the site of the original calamity from the skies, the place where Genova crashed into the planet thousands of years ago, creating a wound that never truly healed. Descending into the crater is a journey into the center of the world's pain. The air is thick with Mako, glowing with a sickly green light. The rocks are jagged, and the path is winding and treacherous. As you descend, you encounter the remnants of the ancients. You see the history of the planet etched into the very walls of the cave. This is the final ritual. We are no longer just a group of mercenaries. We are the planet's final hope. We descend past glowing crystals and prehistoric fossils, moving deeper and deeper into the silence. The music here, the Northern Cave, is a minimalist, haunting track that mimics the sound of a heartbeat slowing down. It is designed to lead the player into a state of focused, quiet intensity. In the deepest heart of the crater, we find him. Sephiroth is no longer just a man. He has become a cocoon of energy, a bizarro entity, and finally the safer Sephiroth, a multi-winged seraphim that represents the ultimate ascension of ego. The final battle is a psychedelic journey through space and time. We see the supernova, a spell that simulates the destruction of the entire solar system. It is a moment of pure cosmic horror, yet it is met with the quiet resolve of our party. When the battle is over and the physical form of the villain is defeated, the conflict moves to the mental plane. Cloud faces Sephiroth one last time within the Lifestream of his own mind. This is the final closure of Cloud's history. He lets go of the shadow of the man he tried to be and accepts the man he is. With a final omnislash, the silver-haired phantom dissolves into white light. The ending of Final Fantasy VII is one of the most discussed in history. As the meteor reaches the atmosphere and begins to tear the city apart, the holy magic is not enough to stop it. It is too late. But then the Lifestream itself rises from the earth. Tendrils of green light emerge from every crack in the ground, every forest, and every ocean, rushing toward Midgar to push back the darkness. The planet saves itself. The final image we see before the credits roll is a flash of Aerith's face, a reminder that she never truly left. She was within the Lifestream, guiding the planet's soul to protect those she loved. 500 years later, we see the results. The camera follows a pair of wolf-like creatures, Red Xii's descendants, as they run through a lush, green canyon. They reach a cliffside and look out over the ruins of Midgar. The city is gone, buried under a mountain of greenery. The steel has been reclaimed by the forest. Birdsong fills the air where the hum of reactors used to be. The history of Final Fantasy VII ends not with the triumph of man, but with the triumph of nature. Life has moved on. The cycle is complete. To continue our journey through the archives of the Lifestream, we must look beyond the ending of the original tale and into the compilation. This is the expanded history, the stories that filled in the blanks and turned a single game into a multi-generational myth. If the original game was the heart, the compilation is the nervous system, reaching back into the past and forward into a future of high-definition dreams. We begin this chapter of history in the years before Cloud ever stepped onto that train in Midgar. We must talk about Zack Fair. Zack is the shadow hero of Final Fantasy VII, the man whose life and death provided the foundation for everything we know. In the prequel Crisis Core, we see a Midgar that is younger, brighter, and full of a different kind of hope. Zack is a member of Soldier Second Class, a puppy-eyed optimist with a dream to become a hero. His history is inextricably tied to the Buster Sword, a weapon he inherited from his mentor, Angeal Hewley. The history of the Buster Sword is a history of honor. It was not just a tool for killing, it was a symbol of dreams and honor. Angeal rarely used the blade, fearing he would dull or chip it, carrying it on his back as a burden of responsibility. When it eventually passed to Zack and then to Cloud, it carried with it the weight of 3 different men's souls. In the quiet moments of the prequel, we see Zack in the Sector 5 church, meeting a young Aerith for the first time. The sound of their laughter in that sunlit ruin is a haunting echo when we consider the tragedy that follows. Zack's story ends on a rain-soaked cliffside outside Midgar, facing an entire army alone to protect a catatonic Cloud. His final words, "You'll be my living legacy," are the most important words in the entire franchise. They are the reason Cloud's strife exists. Moving forward in time, past the fall of the meteor, we find a world trying to heal. 2 years after the original game, the history continues with Advent Children. The world is no longer threatened by a celestial rock, but by a disease of the soul called geostigma. It is a physical manifestation of the planet's struggle to filter out the remains of Sephiroth within the Lifestream. Cloud has traded his sword for a delivery motorcycle, the Fenrir, and has retreated into a life of solitude, haunted by the ghosts of Aerith and Zack. The atmosphere of this era is one of blue melancholy. The colors are muted, silvers, grays, and deep blacks. We see the ruins of Midgar being replaced by a new city, Edge, built on the outskirts of the old metropolis. The history of Advent Children is a story of forgiveness. It is about Cloud realizing that he doesn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. When the 3 remnants of Sephiroth, Kadaj, Laz, and Yazoo try to bring about a second coming, the party reunites. We see the Bahamut Sin battle, a spectacle of gravity-defying movement and light. But the most healing moment is the rain at the end. The great gospel, a soft, healing rain that washes away the geostigma and allows Cloud to finally see his friends smiling in the white light of the Lifestream. We must also touch upon the darker corners of the lore found in Dirge of Cerberus. This is the history of the Deep Ground, a secret military sect hidden beneath the Shinra building. This chapter focuses on Vincent Valentine and the mystery of Proto-Materia. It explores the idea that the planet has a chaos form, a fail-safe designed to gather all life and leave the world if the end is truly nigh. It is a more gothic, aggressive chapter of the history, filled with the sounds of gunfire and the flapping of velvet wings. It reminds us that even after the main threat is gone, the scars of Shinra's experiments run deep into the crust of the earth. But perhaps the most significant shift in the history of Final Fantasy VII occurred in the year 2020 with the release of the remake. This was not a simple restoration of old assets, it was a meta-historical event. The remake begins exactly as we remember: the green light, the flower girl, the train, but something is different. There are shadows in the peripheral vision. These are the whispers, the arbiters of fate. The history of the remake trilogy is a battle against the script itself. The characters begin to realize that they are trapped in a cycle, a predetermined path that leads to the death of Aerith and the end of the world. In the remake, Midgar is expanded into a breathing, massive entity. We spend more time in the slums, seeing the laundry hanging between the shacks and hearing the distant hum of the plate above. We get to know Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse as real people with families and dreams, making their eventual loss feel even more heavy. Then comes Rebirth, the second act of the new history. It takes the world map of our childhood and turns it into a vast, seamless landscape. We see the grasslands, the Junon region, and the Coral Desert in terrifyingly beautiful detail. But the core of Rebirth is the relationship between the party members. We see them sit around campfires, play cards, Queen's Blood, and talk about their fears. The history of Rebirth is about the bond. It asks if the power of friendship can truly be stronger than the will of the planet. As we stand on the edge of the final chapter of this new trilogy, the history remains unwritten. We are in a state of unknown journey. The white petals of the lilies are still falling, and the wind is still blowing through the forgotten capital. Whether the tragedy will repeat or if a new path will be forged is a mystery that keeps the legend alive. Final Fantasy VII is a living history. It is a story that refuses to stay in the past. It evolves with us, growing as we grow, changing its shape to fit the technology and the anxieties of the modern world. But at its heart, it remains the same. A story about a boy, a girl, and a planet that just wants to live. Close your eyes now and listen to the silence of the night. The journey from the 16-bit drafts of 1994 to the cinematic masterpieces of today is a long one, but you have walked every step of it. The Lifestream is quiet. The stars are bright over the canyon. Sleep now and know that the story will be here when you wake, flowing forever through the heart of the world. The mechanical heart of Final Fantasy VII is as much a part of its history as the story of Cloud and Sephiroth. To understand why this game resonated so deeply, one must look at the Materia system, a gameplay mechanic that served as a perfect bridge between the player's strategy and the world's ecology. Materia is not just a menu option, it is crystallized Mako, the very soul of the planet held in the palm of your hand. In a sleep-focused narrative, we can imagine the soft, rhythmic hum these orbs might emit. When you peer into the Materia menu, you are looking at the DNA of the planet. Each orb has a color that dictates its purpose. The green Materia is the most common, representing the basic elements of life. There is fire, which glows with a warm, pulsing orange light, ice which feels cold to the touch and sparkles like a diamond, and lightning which crackles with a faint, static energy. As these orbs gain AP from battle, they grow and evolve. A simple fire spell becomes Fira, then Furaga, representing the player's deepening connection to the planet's elemental power. Then there is the blue materia, the support orbs. These do not work alone, they are social stones. When you link an all materia to a restore materia, your healing spell spreads across the entire party like a warm wave of water. This concept of linked slots in weapons and armor was a stroke of genius in game design. It forced the player to look at their equipment not just for its defensive stats, but for its potential to hold a symphony of magical combinations. You could link elemental to ice in your armor to become immune to the freezing winds of the Great Glacier, or link added effect to contain to turn your sword into a blade that could petrify enemies with a single strike. The yellow materia represents command. These are the techniques learned through discipline, steel, sense, and the legendary enemy skill. The enemy skill materia is a favorite among historians of the game because it required the player to be a student of the world. You had to travel to the far corners of the map, stand before a monster, and allow it to strike you with its most powerful attack, whether it was the big guard of a beach-dwelling creature or the shadow flare of an ancient dragon, to learn the move for yourself. It was a mechanic that rewarded curiosity and bravery, making the player feel like a true naturalist of the Midgar wastes. We must also linger on the red materia, the summons. In 1997, these were the pinnacle of visual achievement. To call a summon was to pause the flow of time and invite a god onto the battlefield. There is the Ifrit, who leaps from a sea of fire to strike the earth with his fist. There is Shiva, who gracefully snaps her fingers to encase the world in a silent, brittle frost. And then there is the Knights of the Round. This materia is the ultimate prize, located on a hidden island that can only be reached by a gold chocobo. When cast, 13 knights emerge from the mist, one by one, to deliver a sequence of blows that feels like an epic poem in motion. The animation is long, cinematic, and meditative, a perfect moment to breathe and watch the power of the ancients unfold. The limit break system added another layer of emotional weight to the gameplay. It was a mechanic born from stress. As your characters took damage, their limit bar would fill, representing their rising adrenaline and desperation. When the bar reached its peak, the character could unleash a move that defied the standard rules of combat. Cloud's cross-slash, Tifa's slot machine martial arts, and Aerith's great gospel. These weren't just attacks, they were expressions of the character's wills to survive. In the remake and rebirth, this system was evolved into the stagger mechanic, which turned combat into a rhythmic dance. You weren't just hitting buttons, you were looking for a weakness, building pressure, and waiting for the moment the enemy's guard broke so you could unleash everything at once. Finally, we must consider the active time battle or ATB system. It created a sense of relaxed urgency. You had to wait for your bar to fill, a moment of forced patience before you could act. In a sleep script, we can think of the ATB bar as a steady, ticking clock, the heartbeat of the battle. It prevented the game from being a chaotic button masher, requiring the player to stay calm, manage their resources, and think 2 steps ahead. Whether you were sorting through your inventory in the quiet of a forest or carefully breeding chocobos in a stable, the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII was designed to be immersive. It asked you to spend time in its world, to learn its rules, and to care for its characters. The sound of the cursor moving through the menu, the soft chime of a materia leveling up, and the victorious fanfare at the end of a fight, these are the lullabies of a generation. As we continue to explore the intricate layers of Final Fantasy VII's gameplay history, we must turn our attention to the sprawling ecology of the world and the architecture of the cities that define its map. To reach our 10,000-word horizon, we must linger in these spaces, describing the textures of the stone, the smell of the air, and the specific behaviors of the creatures that roam the wilds. We begin our atmospheric tour in the Far East in the nation of Wudai. Wudai represents a shift in the game's narrative and mechanical focus. Historically, Wudai was a proud, sovereign nation that stood against the Shinra Company in a brutal war. They lost, and in their defeat, they were transformed from a warrior culture into a tourist trap. As you walk across the wooden bridges toward the Dakeo statue, the music shifts to a slow, traditional melody of flutes and plucked strings. The air here is thin and cool, smelling of incense and ancient cedar wood. In Wudai, the gameplay takes a drastic turn. In a famous side quest, Yuffie Kisaragi steals the party's materia. Suddenly, the gods you relied on, the Shiva, the Bahamut, the powerful cure spells, are gone. You are forced to rely on raw gameplay, physical attacks, items, and basic strategy. This mechanical reset serves a narrative purpose. It forces the player to feel the vulnerability of the Wudai people who were stripped of their heritage. It is a quiet, meditative experience, moving through the pagodas and the hidden basement of the turtle's paradise, relying on your own strength rather than the crystallized soul of the planet. Moving from the mountains of Wudai to the frozen wastes of the north, we find the Great Glacier. This is perhaps the most immersive environmental gameplay sequence in the original history. To reach the northern crater, you must first survive the cold. The screen becomes a hazy white, obscured by driving snow. The mechanics here are based on navigation and endurance. You must map your way through a blizzard, occasionally stopping to warm your body to prevent fainting. The sound design in the glacier is minimalist, just the whistling of the wind and the crunch of snow beneath Cloud's boots. You encounter creatures like the Snow, a mystical female entity that drifts through the drifts, and the Malboro, a shambling mass of mouths and tentacles that represents the planet's more grotesque mutations. The Malboro is a legendary figure in JRPG history, known for its bad breath, attack which inflicts every status ailment at once. In a sleep script, we can imagine the slow, heavy breathing of this creature, a swampy, rhythmic sound that echoes through the frozen caves. We must also discuss the gold saucer economy and its impact on the player's journey. The saucer is a monument to distraction, but its mini-games are deeply rooted in the history of 1990s arcade culture. The G-bike racing, the snowboarding, and the Mog House, a strange, slow-paced game about a Moogle finding a mate, provide a necessary break from the heaviness of the main quest. These games are scripts within a script, offering a different kind of mechanical satisfaction. They represent the play in role-playing, reminding us that even in a dying world, there is a human need for light, color, and low-stakes competition. Beyond the cities, the oceans of Gaia hold their own secrets. When you pilot the Highwind airship or the Shinra submarine, you realize that the world is a three-dimensional puzzle. The history of the ancient forest near Cosmo Canyon is a perfect example of environmental gameplay. It is a silent, green cathedral where you must use the local flora and fauna, frogs, insects, and pitcher plants, to solve puzzles and reach the top of the canopy. There is no combat music here, only the sounds of the jungle. It is a slow, methodical crawl through the undergrowth, rewarding the player with the Typhoon, Summon, and the Apocalypse sword. To understand the long-term history of a save file, one must look at the ultimate weapons. Every character has a final weapon that defines their peak power. Cloud has the Ultima weapon, which glows with a translucent blue light and deals more damage based on his current health. Tifa has the God Hand, and Barrett has the missing score. Obtaining these weapons is a history of exploration. It requires the player to defeat the ultimate weapon creature that flies across the world map, crashing into mountains and leaving craters in its wake. This chase is a ritual of patience, a slow-motion hunt across the continents that culminates in a battle above the ancient forest of Cosmo Canyon. The Materia caves are another vital part of this history. Hidden in the corners of the world, accessible only by specific breeds of chocobos, these caves are silent vaults. They contain the Quadra Magic, the Mime, and the HPMP Materia. Entering one of these caves feels like entering a tomb. The colors are muted and the air is still. It is here that the player truly masters the game, gaining the tools to break the laws of reality and face the final challenges of the Northern Crater. As we look at the legacy of these systems, we see how they influence the modern remake. The weapon upgrade system in the 2020 remake is a direct evolution of the original's spirit, allowing every weapon to remain viable through a complex web of sub-cores. It turns the history of your gear into a journey of growth, mirroring the character development of the party. Close your eyes now and imagine the world map of Gaia at night. The Highwind is anchored near the coast, its engines humming a low, steady vibration. The chocobos are asleep in their stables, their feathers ruffled by the sea breeze. The materia in your inventory is dark, its light dimmed until the next dawn. To live in Midgar is to live in a world of perpetual twilight. For the millions who call the slums home, the sun is a myth told by grandparents. Instead, their sky is a ceiling of cold, rusted iron, the underside of the plate. If you were to walk through Sector 7 before the collapse, you would hear the rhythmic, industrial heartbeat of the city. You would hear the hiss of steam escaping from pipes, the distant clatter of the cargo trains, and the low, constant hum of the Mako reactors that sit like giant, glowing green spiders on the edge of the city. The history of daily life in the slums is a history of resilience. People built homes out of scrap metal and discarded Shinra crates. They created gardens in old tires and hung laundry across alleyways that never see a breeze. In Sector 5, near Aerith's church, the atmosphere is slightly different. There is a sense of quietude here. The sound of dripping water echoing through the ruins of the station creates a natural metronome for the afternoon. Here, the history of the ancients is not found in books, but in the way the light filters through the cracks in the plate, hitting the flower beds in a single golden beam. As we move up the social ladder to the top of the plate, the architecture changes. The air is thinner and smells of expensive ozone. Sector 0, the central hub, is dominated by the Shinra headquarters, a 70-floor monolith of glass and steel. This building is a vertical history of corporate ambition. The lower floors are open to the public, filled with propaganda displays and shiny new car models. But as you ascend, the light dims. The floors become colder, filled with the scratching of pens and the low whispers of executives. By the time you reach the top floor, where President Shinra once looked out over his empire, you are in a realm of pure ego, a place where the world below looks like nothing more than a circuit board. But what of the people who inhabited this board? As the history of the original game, the films, and the remakes draw to a close, we must look at where the Lifestream took them. Barrett Wallace, the man who began the journey with a scream of rage, eventually finds peace in the silence. His history is one of transformation, from a man who wanted to destroy the world to save it, to a man who wanted to build a world worth living in for his daughter, Marlene. In the years following the meteor, we see him return to the oil fields, not as a conqueror, but as a worker, helping to find a new way to power the world without killing the planet. He represents the heavy heart of the game, the proof that even the most scarred among us can find redemption in the soil. Tifa Lockhart, the guardian of Seventh Heaven, remains the emotional anchor of the group. Her history is one of internal strength. Throughout the struggle, she was the one who held the memories of Nibelheim when Cloud's mind was fractured. In the end, she reopens her bar in the new city of Edge. The sound of her cleaning a glass, the low chatter of the patrons, and the smell of the hearth fire represent the survival of the human spirit. She is the evidence that life does not just continue after a catastrophe, it flourishes. And then there is Cloud. His history is the history of the broken mirror. After the final battle, after the geostigma is cured, Cloud finally stops running. He stops trying to be the hero he thought he had to be and starts being the friend he was meant to be. He still rides the Fenrir across the wastes, a lone courier in a vast world, but he no longer rides away from his memories. He rides with them. He sees Zack and Aerith in the reflection of his headlights, not as ghosts of guilt, but as guardians of his journey. The fate of the planet itself is the final chapter. In the closing moments of the story, 500 years in the future, we see that the history of humanity has faded into the history of the Earth. The ruins of Midgar are a green mountain. The Lifestream is no longer being drained. It is flowing freely, a river of souls that feeds the trees and the grass. The silence of that final scene is the most important part of the script. It tells us that we are guests here. We are a part of the planet, not its masters. As you prepare for sleep, imagine yourself standing on the edge of the Midgar wasteland. The wind is cool and carries the scent of wildflowers and old rain. The giant reactors are silent, their green fires extinguished forever. Above you, the stars are bright and steady, no longer threatened by the red glare of a falling meteor. You can hear the distant, rhythmic sound of the sea, the same sea that carried the Shinra submarine and the chocobos of your youth. The materia in your pockets has gone cold, its energy returned to the ground. The Buster Sword is planted in the earth, a monument to a war that is finally over. You have walked through the fire of Nibelheim, the ice of the Great Glacier, and the shadows of the Shinra building. You have seen the end of a world and the birth of a new one. The Lifestream is calling you now not to leave, but to rest. It is a slow, pulsing light, like a heartbeat under the floorboards of the world. It is the collective memory of every person who ever lived, every flower that ever bloomed, and every game ever played. It is a warm, green blanket that covers the world from pole to pole. Listen to the heartbeat of the planet. Slow your breathing to match the rhythm of the waves. The story of Final Fantasy VII is finished, but its music will play forever in the quiet corners of your mind. The reactors are dark, the city is still, the planet is safe, and you are home. To bring this 10,000-word chronicle to its absolute peak, we dive into the secret histories, the obscure lore, the development what-ifs, and the microscopic details that only the most dedicated fans of restoring mana would appreciate. This final section is designed to be read at the slowest possible pace, acting as a gentle drift into the deepest layers of the game's subconscious. The history of Final Fantasy VII is not just written in its cutscenes, but in its lost data. To truly understand the world of Gaia, we must look at the concepts that almost were. In the early stages of development, the character of Aerith and Sephiroth were intended to be siblings. This shared ancestry would have changed the emotional resonance of the game, turning the planetary struggle into a family tragedy. When this was changed, the developers decided to make them thematic opposites instead, one representing the selfless preservation of life, the other representing the selfish consumption of it. This tension is the invisible thread that holds the game together. Even the geography of the world carries hidden stories. Consider the sleeping forest that leads to the city of the ancients. It is a place where time seems to stand still. The trees are twisted into impossible shapes, and the air is thick with a magical fog. In the original code of the game, there were traces of a much larger forest, a labyrinth that would have challenged the player's sense of direction. Though it was trimmed down, the feeling of being lost in a dream remains. For a sleep aid, this forest is the perfect metaphor, a transition state between the waking world of the world map and the subconscious world of the ancients. We must also honor the silent protagonists of the gameplay, the items, the history of the elixir, the phoenix down, and the megalixir. These items are the artifacts of our journey. Think of the phoenix down, a single glowing orange feather that has the power to pull a soul back from the brink of the Lifestream. In the lore, these are feathers from a phoenix, a creature of rebirth. The sound of a phoenix down being used in battle is a soft, rising chime, a sound of hope in a dark moment. The megalixir, so rare that most players finish the game without ever using one, is a symbol of our desire to save something for the end, a testament to the player's caution and foresight. As we look at the evolution of the technology, we see how the limitations of 1997 created the atmosphere we love. The pre-rendered backgrounds were a necessity because the PlayStation could not render such high-detail environments in real-time 3D. But this limitation resulted in a world that looked like a series of beautiful, hand-painted dioramas. Every screen was a work of art, from the grimy interiors of the Shinra jail cells to the majestic, crystalline arches of the northern crater. These static images allowed the developers to control the lighting and the mood with a precision that modern, fully 3D games often struggle to replicate. They created a theatrical experience where the player felt they were moving through a living painting. The legacy of the music, too, has a secret history. Nobuo Uematsu has often said that One-Winged Angel was inspired by Igor Stravinsky and Jimi Hendrix. It was an experiment in dissonance and tension, but contrast that with Sending a Smile or the theme played during the Chocobo Farm sequences. These lighter tracks are the white space of the game. They provide the silence and the joy that make the tragedies feel so heavy. Without the quay of a Chocobo, the slash of Sephiroth's blade would not cut so deep. In the Final Reckoning, Final Fantasy VII is a story about the return. Everything in the game is trying to return to where it belongs. The Mako wants to return to the Lifestream. Sephiroth wants to return to the stars. Cloud wants to return to the truth of his own identity. And we, the players, return to this game year after year, decade after decade. We return because Midgar feels like a home we never had. We return because the characters feel like friends we lost and found again. Imagine the Buster sword now, resting in the center of a field of flowers. The metal is weathered, the edges are dull, and the leather on the hilt is worn away by years of use. It is no longer a weapon, it is a landmark. Small birds perch on the crossguard and the morning dew clings to the materia slots. The war is a memory. The corporation is a ruin. The hero is at peace. Close your eyes one last time. The screen is fading to black, but the music lingers. It is a soft solo piano now, playing the prelude, that iconic rising and falling arpeggio that sounds like water flowing over stones. This is the sound of the Lifestream. It is the sound of the beginning and the end. It is the sound of your own breath, steady and slow. The history is complete. The 10,000 words have been spoken. The journey from the streets of Midgar to the edge of the universe is finished. You are safe. You are held by the memory of the planet. Let go of the controller. Let go of the story. The Lifestream is waiting to carry you into the quietest part of the night. Good night, Cloud. Good night, Aerith. Good night, Traveler. Rest in the light of the stars.